Parshas Shemini, Parshas Parah, Tafshin, Pei Beis. We're actually going to be benching Rosh Chodesh this week, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Purim seems way behind us, and we're now slowly creeping up on the Yom Tov of Pesach, and we'll try to touch upon that theme also a little bit in the shir tonight, just a little bit of a schedule and location change tonight on the shir. And we're going to begin by talking about the end of this week's Parsha, Parshas Shemini. And at the end of the Parsha, the Torah instructs us regarding ma'achalois asurais, foods and different things that may not be eaten. The Torah forbids us from eating different types of food, which foods we can eat and which ones we really should not eat. And the Pasuk tells us, after speaking about the ma'achalois asurais, the Pasuk tells us, Ki ani Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I am Hashem, hamale eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, who took you up from Eretz Mitzrayim, liyos lachem le'lokim, to be a God for you, v'yisem kedoshim, you should be holy. Why? The Pasuk tells us, Ki kadosh ani, Hashem says, because I am holy. And the Gemara, Masechta Bava Metzia, Daf Samach Aleph Amud Beis, points out that we need to notice over here, no word in the Torah is for no reason. And there's a very different term used here in our Parsha, at the end of the Parsha of Ma'achalois Asurais. The Torah normally says, when speaking about going out of Mitzrayim, that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, the Torah says, either Ani Hashem, Asher hoitzeisi eschem, I took you out of Mitzrayim. Many times the Torah speaks about hoitzeisi yitzias Mitzrayim, right? The theme of Pesach also, yitzias Mitzrayim. However, over here in our Parsha, have you ever noticed that? There's something that you don't find anywhere else. We changed the lashon not to hoitzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. We speak about hamale eschem, that I took you up. I lifted you up. I lifted you closer to hamale, taking you up from Mitzrayim. And Rashi, I just want to point out that Rashi actually says over here a very important thing, that when we say Ani Hashem hamale eschem, we're making another very important point. Rashi says that it's like a condition. I took you out of Mitzrayim on the condition that we keep the mitzvahs. That's why it says over here, Hamale eschem al menas, that you keep the mitzvahs of the Torah. So Nesivos Shalom asks on that point too, that it's very good that we're making such a strong point over here, that there was a condition that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, al menas, on the condition that we keep the Torah. Why are we making that point here? Why decide to bring that point up, to bring that point across when we're talking about foods that are usher? I could think of many other things in the Torah, many other times that it says Ani Hashem, and that should be the almanas. Yet, over here, this is where we say, this is a condition. I took you out of Mitzrayim not to act the way you want to act. I took you out of Mitzrayim to keep the mitzvahs. So Nesivos Shalom begins his explanation on the points that we just asked and what we just spoke about by mentioning the Yesod of the Ramban, a very famous Yesod of the Ramban, by the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tiyu. We know there's a Parsha, Kedoshim Tiyu, Parshas Kedoshim coming up soon also. And besides Parshas Kedoshim, many times in the Torah speaks about the inyan of Kedusha. And the Ramban tells us that the lesson of Kedoshim Tiyu is not the lesson of not doing Averos, because the Torah specifically tells you what not to do. But the lesson of Kedoshim Tiyu is the lesson of what's Kedoshim, what does it mean to be holy? to be holy, that what Hashem wants you to be holy is Kadesh Atzmecha B'muterlach. Kadesh Atzmei B'muter. That not just things that are Aser, that after the Torah teaches about all the things that are actually Aser, there's something we have to know, that a person should not be a novel B'Rshus HaTorah. That just because the Torah doesn't tell us something, the Torah doesn't tell us that something is Aser, does not mean that you should go ahead and do it. You know, we talk about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, however you want to describe this, but novel B'Rshus HaTorah means that a Jew acts differently. And it doesn't have to be specifically delineated in the words of the Torah. So the Torah tells us at the end of our parsha, after Machalas Asurais, V'yisem Kedoshim. We want to make a point over here that it's not just staying away from the foods that are usher, because that the Torah already told us just before the Torah tells us what's usher. But after all the words that the Torah tells us, all the things that the Torah tells us that are usher, and all the foods and different types of animals and things that you can't eat, the Torah tells us V'yisem Kedoshim. They're not just staying away from foods that aren't kosher. It's how we go about eating and behaving with the foods that are mutter. How do you eat? And everybody could be sensitive to this in their own way, and everybody understands this, different sensitivities of how we approach food, how we approach the subject of food, how we flaunt our food, however you want to look at it. And I'm not here I don't know myself exactly, because times change, and more and more things seem to be added to this theme, but a Jew eats differently. We don't do what everybody in the world says to do. We don't eat like the other people of the world. And we say it here, Dafka, that it's on this condition, V'yisem Kedoshim, on this condition that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim to act with Kedusha, Kadesh Atzmecha B'muter. Be mekadosh yourself with the things that are mutter. It doesn't say it in the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch may not say it straight out, but we know what our Chachamim want. We know the way our Gedolim want us to act. We know what we're supposed to do, and food is a very important theme and a very important part of that equation. We're different than the people of the world, and even when it's mutter, we do it with Kedusha. And when we left Mitzrayim, the Nesivos Shalom brings out a very, very beautiful point. He says, you know what? When we left Mitzrayim, there were two different aspects of leaving Mitzrayim. One aspect was Yitzia, going out. Mitzrayim was in the Memtes, Shari Tumah. Klal Yisrael was one step away from dropping off and never being able to come back, Chas v'Shalom. And there was a Yitzia from that we went out, up from the Memtes Shari Tumah, all the way to Kabbalah Satorah. That was a Yitzia from the bad, from the corruption of Mitzrayim. And then there's the second part of going out of Mitzrayim. And that was HaKadosh Baruch Hu choosing us and taking us to be the chosen nation. That's already a whole other story. That's already a whole other level. And the preparation for this second part of being Hashem's nation, of being the nation that's close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the requisite for that, the preparation for that, is V'yisem Kedoshim. What the Torah tells us in our parsha. Why? Ki Kadosh Ani. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, because I am holy, then you must act that way too. You have to act different. So therefore, in our parsha, the Torah doesn't say Asher Hoitzeisi Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim. We speak about that in other places, because now when we're speaking about Kedusha, about becoming the nation that is unique to be attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we're speaking about the nation that is now the Am HaNivchar, the Torah tells us about the other part of it leaving Mitzrayim. Hamale Eschem, I'm bringing you up to me, to be the chosen nation, to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're speaking about connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu here. And it's not just staying away from things that are usher. It's not just staying away from foods and things that are usher. It has everything to do with how we act when we're doing things that are mutter. That's Hamala Eschem. That's what raises us up above everyone and all the other things of the world by being Mekayim Kadesh Atzmacha B'Muterlach. And the only place that the Torah tells us about Hamala Eschem Me'eretz Mitzrayim is right here. In our Parsha, when it talks about food and the foods that we could eat and how we eat, that's where the Torah says this very important lesson. Nesivos Shalom brings from the Yisoid HaAvodah, who brings from the Rambam, who writes in his letters that the thoughts and hashkafas of a person come from what a person eats. Very interesting. We know that people are very makbid, and we should be makbid. First of all, to be makbid that things are perfectly kosher, and second, they use a lashon, Rambam use a lashon of a person eats with yishuv hadas, whatever that means. How you eat, whether you eat for the right reasons, right purposes, how you eat, what you eat. There's a lot of variables over here. But it says if one eats b'yishuv hadas, because why? Physically, the Rambam tells us your food turns into, your dam turns into blood, right? And blood is the yisoid of your nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Blood is really what makes a person go. So much stems really from what you eat and how you eat it. And now just to bring in Pesach a little bit, B'Shleishim Yom, right? We're a month before Pesach. We're actually just 3 weeks before Pesach now. As we get closer to Pesach, we want to remember that B'chol dar v'dar chayev adam li'oros es atzmai, that the lessons of Yetzias Mitzrayim are not history lessons just. The lessons of Yetzias Mitzrayim, including what we're talking about tonight, are lessons that are eternal lessons and that apply and we have to adapt to us in today's world. And we have to remember from tonight's year, what's our Pesach lesson from this year, that we speak so much about Yetzias Mitzrayim for Pesach. We need to remember that there were two chalakim, two divisions, two parts of leaving Mitzrayim. There's the leaving the bad behind, which we speak about all the time, and then there's the connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the Am HaNivchar, that's part of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Hamala Eschem, I took you out on the condition that you're different, that you act different, that you're the Am HaNivchar. To remember this week, we have to think about the hashpah of Hamala Eschem coming close, and being close with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That works, and that is really begun, and that really gets going when we think of this lesson of what Kadesh Atzmacha B'Muter. We all know in our own lives, everybody knows how they can improve in that, and this is one theme that Nesivos Shalom speaks about, that we have to remember that Pesach is not just about picking yourself, getting ourselves out of the mud and leaving the bad and corruption and everything of Mitzrayim behind. It's also about what are you going to do when you leave everything behind? Who are you going to be? Are you going to be something different? Are you going to just look like them but in a different place? You're going to just make a Jewish place to act like a Mitzri? That's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to us and says, V'yisem kedoshim, you should be holy. Why? Ki kadosh ani, because I want you to be close to me. I want you to act in a different way than everyone else in the world. And that's really the lesson of the end of Parshas Shmini. Parshas Parah this week, we also speak about Tahara. So this week we have Kedusha and Tahara, and these are really things that set a Jew apart. You look at people and you think that all human beings look the same. We have to respect every human being, but understand, when it comes to Kedusha and Tahara, we are different. We are the Am HaNivchar. Hamala Eschem, we're above, and we have to act above in order to retain this title and have the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.